So before I go into a comparison of the two platforms and technologies, just a little bit of a disclaimer here. These are all my opinions. I am not an expert in anything. This is just my experience with the platforms, and maybe that can benefit your choices on what's good for you and how you want to expand your motion experience. That said, these platforms, it's not a fair comparison for many reasons. One of them is they are nowhere close to the same price range. The D-box platform is a Gen 1, so it's an older D-box platform, and there's different technologies. One is a 4 actuator system, and the other is a 4 motor system. A 3 motor system, a 3 DOF platform. And I believe that the technology there is called worm gear. In short, basically a worm gear kind of a motor system is more of a traditional gearing. So the motor spins fast, and that's geared down to slower motion, and also changes the angle of the motion as you can see. It's not in line with the motor movement. The movement of the arms also is like always a fraction of a full RPM, so they never really go full RPM, at least the output from the gearing. While on the actuator system, that is a screw system, so it's geared. It's not really geared. It's a rod it's a threaded rod that's connected pretty much directly to the shaft of the electric motor, and as the electric motor spins, it moves up or down a nut or similar mechanism. Anyway, both of those have their benefits, at least in the implementation that I'm looking here between D-box and DOF. I find, in short, that the actuator system is much better at doing fine movement, like vibration and road feel. It absolutely excels at that. The D-box system that I have only has an 1.5 inch full motion travel, so it doesn't really move a lot, and that means that it's not great in doing, like, emulating a body roll of a car or something like that, but it is really good in getting that fine movement from the road, the feeling from the dampeners, etc. I also find that it's not, and maybe this is a symptom of the short movement more than the speed, but I find that the speed of the movement is not as fast in the actuator system. It seems to be slower. One of the things that I thought I would be getting out of the actuator system would be heave, in that when I'm doing jumps in dirt rally or something like that, I would feel like that little butterflies in your stomach when you get weightless for a fraction of a second when you're dropping, right? That never happens. I don't really feel the heave so much, in addition from the D-box platform. Actually, I think the jump movements, I get that much more from the DOF platform, because it's got, of course, more movement, but it's also got much faster movement. So the actuator system it doesn't seem to be able to move fast enough to really give me a experience of when I bottom out the suspension, for instance, right? When you actually get a hit on the car, because the suspension can't travel any further, or when you slide into a wall or hit a tree or whatever it is. So those kind of fast, hard movements tend to be movements that are more in like rallying, off-roading, that kind of experiences. And then so in that kind of experiences, if I had to choose between one of the platforms, if I'd only have one, I would go with the DOF platform, because those big movements is really, I think, where that gives me most of the immersion there. But I'm really loving getting the additional like road feel, also the vibration of the rear wheels when I'm power sliding through an uneven surface, and feeling that grip, slip vibration, right? Of course, the actual traction of the movement, this comes from DOF only, because I don't have an actuator for that axis on the D-box. However, for like formula cars don't have a lot of suspension travel at all. I happen to own a formula car, a Pro Formula Mazda car. That car, the road clearance in that car is about an inch. So having an actuator system that only has like an inch and a half travel is more than ample, because that car just doesn't move more than that. It is pretty planted. And so those actuators can give you a really good sense of what the wheels are doing as they hit the small bumps, as they hit the curbs, etc. You don't need the big movements there. In fact, the big movements like G emulation, stuff like that, it potentially makes you seasick, because well, I guess you could get seasick for many other reasons. But the thing is, that movement doesn't really feel realistic, because G can't really be emulated. The platform can throw you to the side, but it can't sustain that G-force, which it would do in the car. So I find that G isn't really something that I seek out much. However, I do keep G emulation on in my DOF platform, especially for the off-road cars, because the thing that it does really well is it emulates roll of the car, especially like if you're doing off-road trucks or something like that. Those things have a massive amount of body roll, and you get a really good sense of that in the platform when it's actually doing the G emulation. In formula cars though, that makes absolutely no sense at all. So if I had to pick one platform for formula cars, it would absolutely be the D-box platform. It tells me really well what's going on with each wheel. It's much more realistic road feel that I get. You'll see in some of the videos here that, especially in the comparisons, that a slightly bumpy road, there's very little movement from the DOF platform, because it just can't handle those small movements. But that's where the D-box comes in and really excels and gives those that sense of the small bumps in the road. But it doesn't do very well with the big bumps and the jumps which you get in rallying and off-roading. So each platform definitely has its niche and its place, but I find having both together does add in most experiences. For rallying and off-roading, need that big movement of the DOF platform, but oh man, the additional feedback that I get from fine vibration from the D-box is amazing, and it just adds so much to the experience. Alternatively, like in formula cars, I pretty much just use the D-box for formula cars, with the exception of that I still use the traction loss system from the DOF, and I also use the DOF platform to get like acceleration and braking G-forces, because that's it gives me a sense of I guess immersion for braking and acceleration. I think that's about it. I will say though, GT cars. Which is better for GT cars? And the answer to that is, I have absolutely no idea. I don't know how much sway happens in GT cars. I would imagine probably not, but at the same time it's going to be more than a Formula car. So it's just not something that I've ever experienced in real life, and it's hard for me to make any determination. And I also haven't really played with any GT cars since I got the D-box system, so I don't know. I'll probably figure something out once I start playing with them and figure out a configuration that I find fun, but it will have nothing to do with what's realistic, simply because I've never driven a GT car, and so I don't have a comparison there. I have driven a Formula car, so I kind of know what to expect there. Although I've never driven a professional rally car, I have driven a lot of, I guess, saloon cars, and actually that's not true. I did drive a rally car once back in the day, but still, those cars, even though they have stiff suspension, they have a lot of suspension travel also, and so you will get body roll in those, especially in the big off-road trucks. You don't even have to drive one of those to know that, because it's obvious when you watch them driving. Anywho's, that's a long rant for sure. Let's look at a comparison here in Rallycross. It's a couple of laps that I ran with in 3 configurations. One with the DOF only, one with both platforms on, and one with only the D-box. So if you look at the top one, which is the DOF only, you see there's a lot of big movements, right? The platform tilts. It does pretty good job of body roll, and maybe a little bit too much in some cases there. And of course, it does have that traction loss there, which kicks in just it there. If we go to then the D-box only, and there's a reason why they're on top of each other, so we can compare those more in line with each other, and the comparison is a little bit better at the beginning of the video, because the distance increases. If you compare those, you'll see that on the D-box have a lot more of like fine movement, especially when you get into off-road. You'll see that there's more like a vibration of the platform. Also, because my head, it vibrates. Everything is vibrating, and that's because I get that really fine tactile movement from the actuators. But it is missing the big fast movement. Like when we go hit the jump, you will see in the comparison on the jump from DOF versus the D-box, there's a lot more movement in the DOF, and you feel it when you hit the ground in that, which is not so much the case in the D-box, or at least much less so. But then if you look at the comparison of both of them together, you're really getting the best of both worlds, at least in this type of racing, where you have jumps and off-road and body roll of the car. Lastly, I will say that it is ridiculously hard to drive a car in a sim in third person with a chase camera if you're not used to it. I did it for this video, and I'm not doing that again. It was just ridiculously hard. Once you're used to the cockpit view, driving like this is just, it's hard. It took me a while just to be able to finish a lap, and much less do a few that are somewhat consistent. Let's talk about the software real quick. Don't want to stop much on this, but here they are. These are the 2 primary interfaces for the software. D-box side, very plug and play. You install your platform, connect it to the PC, download the software, install it. It works. It works. Wasn't quite as easy on SRS. It was a little bit more involved when I did it. Had some problems with getting the license key and had some problems with connecting to the platform because I had to configure a config file with the right COM port for the platform, stuff like that. So definitely not as plug and play as D-box. Expanding on that, installing game code for each game. You have to do it for each game. It is in D-box. It is very simple. It'll list here at the top the games you have installed out of all of the games that are supported. You can just select the game that you want to install the code for, hit install. This has worked in 100% of all cases that I've tried, and you can count here how many I've done. 7 games, and always worked. Some of the games need to be launched through this game center. As you can see here, it says launch required if it means that you have to launch the game through the game center for it to work. The other ones that see automatic, it just works. Similarly on the SRS side, if you want to install another game, it is a little bit harder. Where are the games? Here we go. Games. As you can see, some of the games have instructions, so you have to click instructions and go step by step to install it. Sometimes this is finding a configuration file and editing it. Sometimes it's adding a string for the startup. Some games allow you to pretty much install it with a one click. It hasn't always worked for me, and then I've had to go to the website and go through these step-by-step instructions. So installing per game is not quite as easy as it is with D-box. I will say though, for some of the D-box installations, my wheel config got lost when I installed the motion code, so I had to reconfigure my wheel. It's probably not going to be an issue for most users, simply because you probably already have configured your wheel at least once for that game. So you should know how to do that, or at least be able to figure it out. Tuning, if you just pick iRacing here, open it up, there's lots of things that you can tune. Whoops, I'm not going to save anything here. I'm also not going to go into depth of what the things are that you can tune here. It's some of the same features, some of different features in SRS. The platforms have different technologies, at least the ones I'm comparing here. So each one is good at some things and not so good at other things. We'll go into that in the comparison. But what I do like though, and I'll give SRS a little bit of a win here, in that in many games, possibly even most of the racing games that I've used it in, it can save a tuning per car. So when you save a tuning, you can select if you want it for the game or specific to this car. And if you select it for this car, then if you change to a car that you've saved the tuning, it will automatically load those tunings. It's not as easy in D-box. The only way I've found to save a separate tuning for a car is to create a new profile, which is not hard. You can just hit clone here and then rename the profile and tune it as you want. Problem would be that when you're changing cars, you would have to manually load the profile that you want for that car. Close that. On SRS, I believe if you have the subscription model, you can also, by one click, install tunings from other advanced users that have spent a lot of time figuring out what are the right tunings for each game and car. Now, I don't have that, so I don't know how well it works. I will say though, I've gone to the website where these tunings are also available, and you can manually copy them, and they work really well, because those guys know a lot more about tuning than I do, so I tend to use their configs. That said, I haven't really had any issues with the pre-configs from D-box, and I didn't really have any issues with the pre-configs from SRS either when I started in the beginning. But once I got more into it, I started to want to tune more or get better tuning. That's it for the software, with one addition, and that is that they work exceptionally well together. No conflict so far. Both apps work, can have both platforms running, and they just seem to be well in sync and everything working as it should. I think it really should be expected, because they're of course taking telemetry from the same game, right? So they should be well in sync, and they are. Sometimes I will even go as far as to have certain movements only done by one of the platforms and others only done by the other platforms. Anyway, I hope some of these rants about motion platforms, specifically the worm gears and the actuators and DOF and D-box, I hope these rants have helped you in maybe understanding a little bit more about these platforms, deciding which one you want to buy or both, and also just maybe plan your way through DIY, building your own platform. What you want to get there? Do you want to get actuators? Do you want to get worm gears? Do you want to try a combination of both? I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope it's helpful, and if it is, give me a like and maybe even a subscribe. Thanks for watching, and have a fantastic day.